Hey, my name's Ian Begley. You're watching the NBA Exchange with Dexter Henry.
What's good, everybody? Happy Friday. It's particularly a happy Friday for you if you are a Celtics fan. We're going to get into that today for sure. Game one of the NBA Finals was last night. It was a very interesting game, a very wild game, including us seeing some things that some of us may have thought we had not seen before, which is rather interesting. But we are underway. I got a chance to take in the game out with some friends last night. That was really good. But I think for those of us that thought it might be looking good or things might be better for the Warriors in this, it did not look good for the Warriors. And it looked really good for the Celtics. So it's perfect because I booked this guest before I knew the outcome of the game at all whatsoever. Had no idea what was going on. Didn't know what the outcome of the game was going to be. But Josue Pavón of CLNS Media will be joining us in 1 second. He's just having some technical issues, but he will be joining us in 1 second. I think he is back up with us to join us here, but he'll be joining us to talk about the Celtics, their big win, 120-108 in San Francisco in game one. Y'all know I picked the Warriors in this series in 6. So it's a little bit concerning if you're the people who pick the Warriors that obviously the Celtics already got off to a good start and they got one here. But I think it's really going to be an interesting series, and we're going to see how that goes. And there's a lot that we're going to talk about in this series with Josue when he gets here, and a lot of the talk is going to be obviously about the fourth quarter of this game. The fourth quarter's game was rather interesting. It's where the Celtics turned things around. It's where they basically took the game. The third quarter looked like the Warriors had it, and the fourth quarter, the Celtics have it. Josue, you ready? I think we got you here. My man Josue is here from San Francisco.
What's going on?
Covering the finals. This is your first finals you're covering, right, bro?
It is, man. And let me tell you, to keep it real, man, it's like a dream. And the game, it was like, is this really happening? Like, listen, I know this isn't the same Golden State Warriors team, but that 17-0 run, I just can't, man, this team, it's the resilience, man. They just show time and time again. But don't get me wrong, this is still going to be a long series. I don't think this is going to be one of those, Celtics in 4 or 5 and anything like that. But strap in. It's going to be a fun ride.
Yeah, man. I think people are definitely, reacting to what happened last night. We're going to get into all that. But yes, salute to you on your first NBA Finals covering. So glad you could be out there.
Appreciate it, man.
I'm really happy. I think anytime people get to experience these things in sports, we should, even personally, we should definitely be grateful for it and, also acknowledge others, man. It's a beautiful experience. I'm glad you're getting to do that. But
appreciate it, Dex, man.
Nah, anytime, bro. Anytime.
Yeah,
man.
you know what it is, man? Because we've been watching this since we were kids. This is, regardless if we don't have a dog in the fight growing up, man, you watch the finals if you were basketball. And guys like you and me, man, like, it's been years. So, yeah, for sure, man. So I really appreciate that.
Nah, anytime, brother. Yeah, you're right. Been watching the finals since I was a kid, since I was 7 years old. I can remember watching every final. So I watched every final since 1991.
Yeah.
So I've just shown my age there. But the Celtics, right? They roll past the Warriors in game one, 120 to 108. Here's what I don't know what your pick was before the series, Josue, but were you shocked at the pretty good energy the Celtics came out with? Because I thought they could be a little bit tired heading to the series, coming off the game 7 with Miami. Were you shocked with the energy and them coming out with this win at all? Was it shocking for you?
It wasn't shocking. I will say I was surprised by that fourth quarter approach. Now, the Celtics have done this before. Going into that fourth quarter, facing a 12-point deficit, I was like, well, this is doable for the Celtics team. They've done this in the past, but they did it so quickly that I was surprised to see not the Warriors, the Warriors not punch back, essentially, right? It was about the 5-minute mark of that fourth quarter. Steve Kerr finally calls that timeout, which I thought that came a little too late. And then the Celtics had, 2 more three-pointers for them to extend that run to 17-0. So I'm surprised by that the Warriors didn't fight back the way they did. But at the same time, looking at what these guys were saying after the game, Draymond Green had some interesting quotes, obviously. Steve Kerr, it just seemed like they were just as surprised as if, maybe they didn't do as much homework as we thought they would, right? I mean, going into this one, you can look at the past couple of playoff series that the Celtics have had. They've had stretches like that. They've had those third quarters where they just completely give it up, and then in the fourth quarter, they're another team, whether it's stringing together defensive stops or putting together the way the 3-point shot, the way that they were able to just keep it flowing. And someone like Al Horford, look, coming into this one on the Cedric Maxwell podcast, man, shout out to Max. I was telling him, look, that's the matchup, one of the more interesting matchups in this series. Draymond Green against Al Horford. Because, look, at the end of the day, and this isn't just about the quotes that he said, but I don't think he respects Al in that regard. I don't think he looks at Al as a fourth quarter scorer, as someone that did what he did against the Bucks in that 30-point performance when he dunked over Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like, people need to realize that this guy is riding on a high that he didn't see this coming, right? 1 year ago, he didn't know what the next step of his career was. He didn't know if he'd be, playing his final years on a rebuilding team, trying to mentor young guys. He wasn't sure if he'd ever be back to this stage. Never mind his very first NBA Finals appearance. I don't think the Golden State Warriors truly understand how important, how big this opportunity is for Al, and he's not going to just, let it go to the side. You know what I mean? He's not gonna go out there and be intimidated, essentially. And I think that's what he did. I really think Al, and of course the rest of the Celtics. Derek White had a heck of a performance coming off the bench. Jaylen Brown, man, talk about someone, stepping in when your top guy just didn't have it scoring wise, but certainly was the playmaker out there with 12 assists, man. Like, it just shows a lot of character from this team, man. And they continue to rise the national stage the way they did on the biggest stage that you can be on, the NBA Finals.
Yeah, no, they absolutely did, right?
Sorry, that was a lot, Dex.
No. This is what you're here for. This is what the people are here to see. And we got some Warriors fans checking in here. Talking about they were disappointed with their play during the fourth quarter. Atoya Ravi, I see you. What's up, man? Disappointed with their play in the fourth quarter, and I think Warriors fans absolutely should be. But you heard Draymond Green say, "Hey, we're not panicking. We're not worried about this. We've been here before." But I want to talk a little more about that fourth quarter because I think the more surprising thing was we all know how good. Well, not we all. I think most of you have been watching the Celtics and watching them through these playoffs. You know how good the defense is, right? But I want to, the numbers here, Josue. The C's offense, right? 15 of 22 from the field, 9 of 12 from downtown in the fourth quarter, right? And a 68% overall, 75% from downtown. They outscored the Warriors 40-16 in the fourth quarter. And then the Warriors went 8 minutes without scoring a field goal, right? You had the 17-0 run, but they did not score a field goal for 8 minutes. I think there's a way to look at this and be like, look, if the Celtics can do this for stretches, they're really scary and they definitely can win this series. How impressed were you with the defense and the offense? Because it's a combination of both in that fourth quarter.
Very impressed. And that's been the character of this team. They string together stops and it just catapults their offense. And it does it in a big way. It happens in a hurry. I've seen it time and time again with this team. And they're not afraid about which opponent they're doing this against. Whether it's the star-studded, the Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant-led net, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jimmy Butler, who was in the finals a couple of years ago, like that rematch, with their back against the wall. The Celtics have shown resiliency time and time again. So, listen, Draymond, to talk about those three-pointers, yes, I don't think the Celtics will be scoring 21 three-pointers every single night throughout the best-of-7 series. To point out guys like Derek White, Marcus Smart, who else was in that? It was 3 of them. It was Derek White, Marcus Smart, and I can't remember exactly who the third one. He was talking about it like, oh man, those guys. Oh, Al Horford, right?
Al Horford and Pritchard, if you want to add him too.
Yeah, he had a couple too, but I think the fact that he zeroed in on those 3 guys was because he's saying, look, they're not going to combine for 15, 16 three-pointers every single game. Okay, true, but what are you going to do to slow down Al? I felt like he was ignoring the elephant in the room. It was more like, hey, what adjustments could you have made personally? I just accountability. And look, maybe that's just Draymond playing mind games. Maybe that's a testament to what was said in the locker room by someone like Steve Kerr, who I'm sure is going to come with the adjustments, the proper adjustments in game 2. But either way, I just think they were really surprised by that. And going into this series, though, I think people overlooked who the Warriors are on offense, their tendencies, if you will, right? I mean, look, this is one of the better defenses in the NBA, right underneath the Celtics, which top the NBA in defensive efficiency. But the Warriors are also close to the top in another category that you don't want to be in, and that's turnovers. And look, when this team goes up against one of the best defense in the NBA, those turnovers can happen in a hurry. And those buckets on the other end, that's what's going to kill you. And that's exactly what the Warriors essentially did in that fourth quarter. They did themselves in a bad way.
Yeah, they absolutely did themselves in a bad way. I just think it was shocking for a lot of people because I don't think there's a time a lot of us can remember through this Golden State stretch of them looking that bad offensively. That shut down. They couldn't get anything that they wanted to get done. It was really interesting. I think the other thing that I'm impressed with, Josue, was the bench here for Boston, right? You got Pritchard stepping up. You got Derek White stepping up, who you mentioned in this. Another big game for him. He's been playing well since the birth of his child. He's been looking really good. How impressed are you with what the Boston bench, particularly those two guys, Pritchard and Derek White, have been able to give? And if you're going to get stuff like that, I think it's going to be scary with Boston.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because, the first couple of rounds in the playoffs, or at least the first round, there were some Celtics fans out there with a bit of buyer's remorse, right? I mean, it was overlooked because he was essentially, the Celtics swept the Nets, right? So, for people to be like, man, what's up with Derek White? You didn't hear that often from Celtics fans and the Celtics media, but halfway through that series against the Bucks, it was like, well, wait a minute. Isn't this the guy? Isn't this the reason why Brad Stevens traded for someone like this? Sure, he's a playmaker. He can play defense. He can guard multiple positions. That's essentially the kind of Brad Stevens, acquisition. And of course, his background, his relationship with Ime Udoka, the trade makes sense. But I think what Celtics fans and the Celtics media were looking for was some sort of consistent production off the bench. And to see him shooting, what was it, about 20% at one point in this playoffs, averaging about 5 points throughout the first 5-6 games of the postseason, that wasn't going to cut it. But then, man, the turnaround he's done, it shows that it isn't a fluke, honestly. This is the third game in a row of another solid production coming off the bench. And the Celtics need that because they're a very thin bench. I looked at the Warriors as having a stronger bench than the Celtics. I looked at the Miami Heat being a deeper team than the Celtics. So they rely on those three guys coming off the bench, and Pritchard and Grant Williams and Derek White. Ime keeps his rotation tight. Daniel Tice will get a few minutes here and there, but for the most part, they need the most out of those guys. And Grant Williams, from a scoring standpoint, just hasn't been the same guy since that big performance against the Milwaukee Bucks.
He has not.
He dropped 20 plus, man. He just hasn't. And look, maybe that he'll figure this out, at some point throughout the NBA Finals. But Derek White, man, the ultimate professional, just the veteran that he's been, the way he's acclimated to with the Celtics. He became a father for the first time a week ago, So I just think all that is relevant in the sense that maybe he's just not in his own head like he was in those first couple of rounds, right? Maybe he's just letting the game come to him. At least that's the way I'm seeing it. He's just not. He's just giving what he's picking up on what the defense is giving him, and I feel like he did that in a big way, but also took some really gutsy shots, man. That 3-pointer, right in Steph Curry's eye, right now, man, this team is rolling for sure. But to see Derek White give you that production off the bench, it comes in a big way because the Celtics that just hasn't been the Celtics' MO all season long. That guys coming off the bench and scoring 20 plus. It doesn't happen often.
Nah, it doesn't happen often, but it's happening now. The other guy that I think people will look at this guy's numbers from last night and they'll be like, oh, well, it just seems like it's okay. But no, his impact to me is felt everywhere in terms of the threat on the offense and defense. That's Robert Williams, man. Robert Williams, he's 4-4 from the field, 8 points, was the lob threat, but he also had 4 blocks in this contest. Looney, who got some offensive rebounds and had been doing his thing, but Robert Williams still got the best of him in this one. Just he, to me, I said he was one of the X factors, Josue, coming into this series to me for the Celtics. And then I think you see that last night with what he's able to do on offense and defense. How much is it? Do you look at that as him being a major key in this series for the Celtics?
Oh, it's humongous. It's humongous. He protects the rim. I mean, look, the defense is just different when he's out there. Al's able to roam more. He doesn't have to stay close to the rim as much. But Rob, his health has been a concern. He's a day-to-day guy for the rest of the way. Ime told us that a couple of weeks ago. So going into the series, I said if you can get 2 solid performances out of Rob, it's going to go in a big way for the Celtics team because we're not quite sure what we're going to get. In that last game against the Miami Heat, he didn't have much in the second half. And that's what happens when you're playing every other day. Now, that's a luxury in the NBA Finals, believe it or not, because that's not the case, right? You got a couple of days off in between. The days off in between the Eastern Conference Finals and Game 1 Thursday was probably the longest stretch of days off that he's had over the past 2 weeks. So that was big for him. And then hopefully these next 2 days will help him as well before traveling back to Boston for Game 3. But yeah, man, they're just a different team when he's out there. I thought it took him a bit to get acclimated, but in that fourth quarter, man, some of those stops were key. The intimidation is key. I thought that had a big part in Bam Adebayo being inconsistent in that Eastern Conference Finals matchup.
Yep.
Rob roaming out there just made him uncomfortable. And Rob, I don't think it was a coincidence that when Rob wasn't out there, the games he didn't play, that's when you saw Bam go, double-double, 20 and 10. The guy who he reverted back to the guy he was in the bubble in some regard. And that was a bit scary for the Celtics because if Rob was unable to finish this series off, it would have been a hell of a lot tougher in that Game 7. But they were able to adjust. And going into this NBA Finals, matchup, I was like, man, they're gonna really need, some Rob, throughout, and especially in Game 1, where I thought this would probably be the longest rest he's gonna get.
Yeah.
So that was huge. That was big.
No, he was huge, man. I think you might look at those numbers and say only 8.6 boards, but to go along with those 4 blocks, like I said, he was everywhere, and he was altering a lot of shots at the rim too.
You know what else, Dex, too?
Yeah.
I feel like he's like a cushion for these guys or something. I don't know, like they just feel better when he's out there. And it's like they want to, have that same intensity. They want to, step it up on the defensive end even more so because they know he's nowhere near 100%. And he's just out there just playing. He's going off of fumes at this point, or at least that's going to be the case in a couple of games where he's really going to be hurting. That swelling in his knee, it's just not getting any better.
Yeah, well, look, if he's still putting up 8, 6 or 4 blocks and he's running off of fumes,
you take that.
They're going to take that right now. They're going to take that one right now. But I think people will look at, the Celtics bounce back ability, right? You're hearing all the stories before the finals, right? Where it's, okay, back in January 6th, they were 11th in the Eastern Conference. They rose up to the top. They battled through 2 grueling Game 7 series before they got here to the finals. But I think you saw some of that bounce back ability right here in this game, right? You look at the first half, particularly the first quarter.
Right?
First quarter, right? Steph Curry's going nuts. I'm looking at some of these shots like, what's Boston doing with their coverage? They're dropping.
Right. I was like, we're going to have one of those nights. Steph's going to have one of those nights. Really, Boston? You're going to give him all that space? Like, yeah, I was with you.
It seemed like it was going to be one of those nights. So what did you hear from the guys following the game about what turned it around, particularly? I don't even want to just say in the second half because that's unfair. In the second quarter, the Celtics got their stuff together. They cut there was a 2-point. They were leading by 2 at halftime. Right. So it was a change around, and then the third quarter went not well for them, and the fourth quarter went extremely well for them. What is it with this ability to bounce back, not just game to game or different point in the season, but quarter to quarter, like possession to possession? This is now becoming the fortitude, so the staple of this team here, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's their identity, Dex. I mean, the defense, when they buckle down, they respond on the other end. It's almost contagious in some regard, right? Going into that fourth quarter, being down by 12, Ime doesn't have to say much, or at least that's what he told us, right? The players, they have that dialogue between themselves. They make sure that everyone is just putting together stuff. And they look at it as one possession at a time. And that's how these things, that's how it happens in a hurry. But, the Golden State Warriors also defensively, I feel like they were challenging them, right? They wanted a shootout. And to their point, that's not going to bode well for the Celtics in that type of matchup, in that type of, setting. But when they were able to string together stops, it just rejuvenated them. They see a 12-point deficit, and it's not a big deal for them. They've done this in the past. But the thing is that on this stage, I just feel like right now, beating those 3 tough teams that they beat in the Eastern Conference, man, they feel like they can beat anyone. And Jaylen Brown, man, he stepped up in a big way. That was something I was a bit concerned about. I was worried because we've seen in the past throughout the season where if Tatum isn't getting it going offensively, if he's ice cold, Jaylen tends to have his stretches, but then he sort of shies away from taking matters into his own hand in that fourth quarter. That wasn't the case. It's the moment. Honestly, I feel like they're on this big stage. They know they've earned this, and they're like, man, they have to get the job done. And I feel like we're seeing that. We're seeing the product of that, and all that, in my opinion, it goes back to Ime. I mean, we can go back to December, January. We can talk about accountability. We can talk about what the conversations he's had with Marcus Smart and the sit down that Tatum and Brown eventually had to have in terms of like, hey, you're happy, right? We're happy playing together, right? Like I called it an uncomfortable conversation. I was saying this back in the bubble, man. I'm like, these two need to have an uncomfortable.
No, you said it the first time you were on the show. I said, can that pair
right?
work? Yeah, and you were like, there's something these guys need to sit and talk, and they need to have this conversation. You talked about that the first time I had you on the show.
Like you go, then I go, you go, then I go. That's just not going to work. That's not a recipe for success. You have to bring in those teammates. You have to bring in everyone, you know, and share the ball around, right? You'll get it back. We used to say on the Celtics postgame show, don't worry, Jalen. Don't worry, Jason. You'll get the ball back. But don't do this ISO stuff all the time. And look, it took a really long time for them to get out of those bad habits, but that's natural. That's what happens in the NBA. These guys have been playing, you know, AAU. They've been the center of attention, you know, and honestly, coming in with that much early success, sometimes sometimes it's a curse, right? Because playing with guys like Kyrie Irving or Kemba Walker or Gordon Hayward, you know, sure, Tatum was a featured player eventually. Same thing for Jaylen Brown. Well, those first few years where they were making those Eastern Conference Finals appearances, like they weren't the top guys quite yet, right? They were still sort of finding their way. So it took a while for them to find their way, or I should say, it took a whole season for them to figure out how to guide this team. And I think you look at the other weapons that the Celtics have and the way this team has come together. Man, this is the product right here. This is exactly what I think Brad Stevens had in mind in terms of putting that defensive first mindset into everyone, having two budding all-stars, superstars that could score 20 plus on any given night, but making sure that the backbone of this team, the identity of this team, is defense. And that's exactly what happened.
You saying that and talking about the identity of the team made me think of something that I hadn't put on my rundown to ask you. But, you know, do we give...
Don't call them a young Warriors, because I feel like
We're not doing
NBA
that.
Finals Media Day, I feel like the Warriors are sort of being like, oh, yeah, that team's cute. They're coming up. they remind me of myself. It was almost insulting, Dex. I'm like,
I know that when somebody gets, it's almost like a little bit of a backhanded compliment, right?
Yes.
In that kind of way.
It had that vibe to it.
Vibe to it. But I wanted to ask you this, because you talked about the identity of the team. And I think when you look at this team and you're like, look, hey, a lot of this team are the guys that Danny Ainge drafted here, right? Danny Ainge got criticized a lot for not making a move, not making a trade, not going off to Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, blah, blah, blah. Right. But these are his guys he's drafted. Does he get any of this credit now too? Or should we not go that far?
That's interesting, because that's been a big conversation around Boston sports talk, you know, right now. Obviously, everyone was hyped up that the NBA, you know, the Celtics are back in the NBA Finals. But they're like, well, wait a minute. Do we give this to Ime? Do we give this to Brad? Do we give this to Danny? And that's so Boston, right? Like who gets the most props? You know what I mean? Like who's the one that we should thank the most? And I'm in the camp of, it comes down to Danny. He put together the groundwork. He hired Brad Stevens, and it was sort of a domino effect from the very start. But look, people can say what they want about the last couple of years of him drafting late in the first, you know, a couple of misses there, middle rounds and stuff. But when it mattered the most, he nailed it. No one can deny that. No one can deny, you know, him not drafting Markelle Fultz when everyone thought he would, and going with Jason Tatum. And not only doing that, but getting another future first out of the deal, and pretty much just, it was a heist, right? That trade to, like, can you imagine where Philadelphia would be if they picked the right guy? You know, like it's easy to go back and say that over time and time again, but at the end of the day, what Danny did was the groundwork, right? And I think that when Jaylen Brown was drafted, people like to, in Boston at least, they like to talk about the fact that, oh, he was booed and fans didn't even, you know, give him a chance. I'm like, yeah, but those boos weren't about Jaylen. They weren't personal. They were about, why don't you trade this pick and get yourself a superstar? But Danny was patient, and Danny, you know, he took the heat. He took the heat those first 3 seasons, you know, before Isaiah popped, before the Kyrie Irving years, before, you know, Kemba Walker was traded, you know, like all those leading up to that, he put down the groundwork, and it blossomed, you know, 3, 4, 5 years later. And that's a beautiful thing.
That's the irony of it too, right? Is what you're saying, in the fact of that, you know, the boos that you heard for Jaylen Brown, that was for, hey, we go get us a star. And then he didn't go get him a star. And now you're winning with the actual guys, Boston fans, that he drafted. So it's almost ironic in that way that they were booing for the star. There were some stars that came where Hayward, Kyrie, like you mentioned, didn't win with those guys or get to this stage with those guys. And now without those guys, here's this young core. sometimes it shows you why sticking the course sometimes matters with your development. Sometimes that matters.
Absolutely. And also when you stick with your vision and you don't let anyone intimidate you or let anyone, lead to you second guessing what your original plan was. And that's Danny. Danny has a plan. He's going to stick with it. People used to love to say, oh, well, Danny has to fleece a team in order to make a trade. I'm like, well, that's the way he operates. Like if he doesn't see a flat out win in the deal,
he ain't doing it.
He's not doing it. And listen, when it came down to breaking up the Celtics big three, KG and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen, Ray already left, but KG and Paul Pierce and all that wasn't easy. Most GMs would have had a hard time doing that, or maybe they would have did it when it was too late. But that was the blueprint of this rebuild. That's what led those picks that the Brooklyn Nets sent over turned into Jason Tatum. It turned into Jaylen Brown, and that was essentially the very beginning to what we're seeing right now.
No, you're 100% right about that. Speaking of Tatum, are you concerned after how he shot the ball in game one? Because I think there's one way to be like, yeah, there's concern. I personally am not that concerned because I like the other stuff that he was doing. He had 12 assists in this game. And I think his playmaking is, we talked about this when you were on the Ainge Hartel podcast, but his playmaking has been really dope. I think particularly in the last two series. And I've been really, really impressed with him on that. And I think it's a lot of growth in that. But are you concerned at all about the way he shot in game one?
Yeah, Dexter, can you hear? I lost you, man. Can you hear me?
You lost me for a second? Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I mean, I'm going to answer your question, but I lost you towards the end of that. But yeah, listen, Tatum's that was a part of his game that he needed to add, right? And I always think of someone like LeBron. I mean, look, not to compare the two, but in my opinion, when LeBron became LeBron, when he was the guy in Miami and was the best player in the NBA, it was because he started to put his effort toward playing defense and team defense and holding people accountable. He started to put his effort towards playmaking and finding guys and making sure that he was, getting everyone involved, and that's exactly what I saw out of Tatum this year. I feel like Tatum he knew that he was at a step of his career where he needed to blossom into being more on the defensive end and also holding guys accountable and, being a leader. I thought it was really telling when he talked about, after winning the Eastern Conference the MVP award for the Eastern Conference Finals. And he was like, man, there were some moments where I was like, can I do this? Can I be a leader, or am I doing this the right way? And I feel like that was really open for him to say, but also it shows how he had to really put forth that effort and let things happen gradually. And that's what I think happened, essentially, especially in the second half of the regular season where he was trying to find his way. And he finally got out of his, I need to go off in order for this team to win. Obviously, this is a clear testament of that, right? On the biggest stage that, Tatum didn't have to score 25, 26 points. He didn't have to go off in that fourth quarter to save the day, but he found his guys, he buckled down defensively, and he did other things that impacted the game. And that's what a superstar does. That's what's going to separate, the perennial all-stars from the guys who are, top five, arguably top five, or no question top 10 in the NBA. And that's Jason Tatum right now for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about that for sure. He's absolutely on another level right now for sure. So, Josue, can you hear me? He's coming out. He'll be back on here in a second. Completely agree that Tatum has taken his game to another level, and Josue is back with us right now. Sorry, I know you couldn't hear me for a second.
I don't know what happened. Your audio cut off, but yeah, I got you now.
You got me now. We're good. So here's the thing you're also going to hear, Josue, and you know this from covering it. People are going to say, don't overreact to game one. You've heard that a million times. So do you think this is real, what we saw from the Celtics in this game one, particularly in the fourth quarter, or was it an anomaly?
Oh, it's real. I think, again, do they score 21 three-pointers again? Maybe not. Maybe close to that. But I think that's the part that stands out the most. But also, Golden State's going to make adjustments. And I think that the one on the top of the list is unlocking Klay Thompson. I think Steve Kerr's going to do a really good job at that. And, I think if we're doing predictions here, I think the series is tied heading back to Boston. But that's okay for the Celtics. You put up a good fight. I'm not going to say they have no chance, obviously, in game two. But I think the adjustments for the Warriors start with Klay Thompson. And it doesn't have to be double screens to get him his open shot. Klay Thompson can attack. He defends at a high level as well. Obviously, he's not 100%, but I think unlocking him is going to be key. Guys like Looney were huge, was a big thorn in the Celtics' side. Offensive rebounds, second chance opportunities. Rob is still questionable heading into game 2, so that could be a big factor heading in. Other guys as well, the depth, Jordan Poole. I thought Andre Iguodala gave them good energy. I wasn't surprised that he was back out there. It's the NBA Finals. They need someone like that. They need a wing defender just to add more pressure to guys like Tatum and Brown. But yeah, I don't think what we saw from Boston was shocking. Look, that fourth quarter alone, I just the 17-0 run I think is more telling of the Golden State Warriors just not buckling down defensively, honestly, and also guys like Derek White and Al Horford just being whether it was making threes or attacking the rim the way Derek White was, it made things tougher for the Warriors. I don't think they were prepared for that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So what do you feel like is the focus in game 2 for the Celtics, right? Because there's one way of looking at this is saying that, hey, we came out to San Francisco, we got what we needed to get done, we took one on the road, or they've locked focus saying, hey, look, we can go back home up 2-0. What do you think the mindset is going to be? Are they just playing with house money? They're focused on taking it all when they went out to the Bay?
I think they're focused on taking it all. I think that's the mindset you have to have, because if you don't, the Warriors will come back in a hard way, and you won't be able to come back. Like, that's the thing. The Celtics, I always give them credit because they have the ability to survive these 8-0, 9-0 runs. And, going into halftime, they somehow have a 2-3 point lead. Like that's something that they've done before. But coming out of halftime, sometimes it's hard to tell what team is going to show up. Like, they've done that before, what we saw in that third quarter. And obviously they survived it in game 1. But maybe that doesn't happen again. They have to make sure that they don't put up a dud like that in that third quarter, because that's not always going to be the case. A win's not always going to be the case, especially when your top dog didn't have it offensively. Does Tatum bounce back? I think he does. But again, is that 3-point shot going to be there? Probably not. Scoring 21 3-pointers is not an easy thing to do in the NBA Finals, and especially the way they were able to put together that humongous run, 40 points in that fourth quarter. That's going to be, the Warriors going to do their absolute best to make sure that doesn't happen again. So the Celtics have to that well-balanced attack, the way they're used to swinging the ball, everyone getting their touches, finding the open guy. I think they're going to try to get back to that and unlocking Tatum in a sense of making sure that he's having that well-balanced attack, getting to the free throw line and getting hot, from the perimeter. I think Tatum comes back in a big way in game 2.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna. I like that you're saying they're gonna have that focus in game 2. I think it's gonna be really interesting. Obviously, it's a big game 2 for the Warriors. They're looking at it like a must-win, and they're gonna try to get that. So it's gonna be good. What was your prediction before I let you go? What was your prediction heading into the series?
Believe it or not, Dex, I had Celtics in 6, and the reason for that is because, the reason for that is because I don't know if they can survive a game 7 against the Warriors. I think it'll be tough. I think it'll be down to the wire. And those situations don't bode well to Celtics, and this is part of their identity that, extends back to the regular season. The last couple of weeks or the last couple of months, essentially, they were blowing out teams. But if it's like a 2-point game, wire to wire, if it's one of those games where the 2-minute mark and they're down by 1 or 2, or they're up by 1 or 2, and they're trying to just cling on, they tend to lose those games. Honestly, they have a less than 500 record in those situations. And you look at Game 7 as a great example of that. Sure, they won, they survived it, but Miami pulling to within 2, that wasn't ideal. Jimmy Butler, if he makes that 3, the Celtics don't survive that game. They don't. They wouldn't be here. And that's neither here or there in terms of Jimmy Butler. Look, I respect it. I don't think that was a bad shot for him. I liked it, honestly. Because
I didn't think so either.
You got to go for the dagger sometimes. And they didn't want to go into OT against the Celtics, but again, that's just that's who they are. Honestly, they can really those turnovers. They can start fumbling the ball in those last couple of minutes, even if they have a 7-8 point lead. And if you're the Warriors, you have to stay with them. You have to stay neck and neck down the stretch, and know that you have a good chance of knocking them out, or at least beating them. If that's the situation in the last couple of minutes of a game.
All right, Josue picked the Warriors in 6. They need 3 more.
Oh no, I said Celtics in 6, man.
Oh, you said Celtics in 6. I picked the Warriors in 6. That was me. I wasn't feeling so good after last night. I picked the Warriors in 6. But listen, man, Celtics.
At the Garden, huh? Okay.
Yeah. Celtics looking good though. After the game 1 win, so it's been a good one. That is Josue Pavón. Please check him out. CLNS Media. He is out in the Bay. He's going to be covering the whole finals. Josue, we're going to have you back on later in the series. for sure.
do it.
Probably when things get back to Boston, we'll have you back there for sure. I always appreciate you coming on and talking to us and all the good stuff. So everybody, please follow his work. Check him out, what he's doing. We got a couple days off till Sunday. You know, Josue will be back to work. And Monday, it's going to be interesting. Will the series be tied at 1? Will it be a 2-0 Celtics lead? We'll find all that out. We'll be back on Monday with you guys to talk some more about the NBA Finals. He's Josue Pavón. I'm Dexter Henry. Until next time, y'all. Peace.
Thanks, guys.